Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Kaylee Isaacs. I'm the founder of the Awake Network and the producer of the Mindful Relationship Summit. And tonight we're going to be joined by senior meditation teacher Fleet Maull, and we're going to explore the drama trap and how we can move past the drama in our personal and professional relationships. So we'll get started with a presentation from Fleet Maull in just a moment. And after that, we're going to open up to the community that's watching live now to ask questions. So if you are watching now, I encourage you to scroll to the bottom of the page where you'll see a comment section and take a moment to introduce yourself, let us know where you're watching from, what you're excited to learn tonight. And also if you have any initial questions, and if questions come up through the event tonight, that's where you'll write them, and we'll be looking there for the questions that we'll draw for later. And I also wanted to give a special thank you to Maull Mountain Center, which, if you haven't been there, is a beautiful meditation retreat center in the Colorado Rocky Mountains. And they're the co-producer of tonight's event, along with the Awake Network. So it's my pleasure to introduce Acharya Fleet Maull, who is going to be leading the presentation tonight. He's a renowned social activist, a peacemaker, senior meditation teacher, and the founder of the Engaged Mindfulness Institute, as well as the Prison Mindfulness Institute. He's also an incredibly wonderful person, a good friend, and a huge supporter and ally to both the Awake Network and Maull Mountain Center. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Fleet.
My pleasure, Kaylee. Great to be here.
So we'll start off hearing a bit about the drama trap and the drama triangle from Fleet, and then we'll move on to questions towards the end. So just a reminder, do put your questions in the bottom of this page in the comment section, and we'll be looking for those to answer at the end of the call.
Great. Thank you very much, Kaylee. Well, good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. And I'm really excited to be able to present on the drama triangle or the drama trap this evening, because in my work with all kinds of groups all around the world, doing work in businesses and corporations and nonprofit organizations, my public seminars, prison work, this distinction about triangulation of drama and the development of toxic drama has been incredibly liberating for tens of thousands of people. And probably, you know, in the work that I deliver all around the world, the two distinctions that people find the most amazingly transformational are the radical responsibility distinction we'll talk about later, and this work around the drama triangle. So I want to first give credit to the developer of this model, Stephen Karpman, as a psychologist, a transactional analysis, who developed this idea of the drama triangle. And it's kind of amazing that he gets credit for it, because it's such an obvious human dynamic, but nonetheless, he's the one who named it, so he certainly gets the credit. Now, some of you may have heard of the drama triangle before or may be familiar with it, and if so, I think we'll go into it in a deep way here that you'll learn many new things. And most importantly, we're going to be talking about when we find ourselves stuck in drama or on the drama triangle. We're going to talk about how do we release ourselves from it? How do we get off the drama triangle? And I think you'll find that really interesting and extremely useful. And then for you, those of you who've never heard of the drama triangle, I think this is going to be like almost a small enlightenment of sorts, because once we know about this phenomena, we see it everywhere. And once we see it, we can make choices about whether we want to participate in it or not. So let's talk about the phenomena of drama a little bit to begin with. So human drama, what does drama mean? It's, we hear the word drama, we may have some negative associations, like being a drama king or a drama queen, or we think of conflict and problems, or, when I ask people in an audience, when I say the word drama, what comes to mind? So sometimes they talk about middle school or high school or teenagers or my kids, or sometimes they say my job or, work, or, so we often have a lot of negative associations with drama. At the same time, drama just simply means there's something going on of heightened interest. And as we all know, there are many dramatic moments in our human life that are quite healthy and quite natural. For example, the birth of a child. I will never forget the moment that my son came into this life as a new being, and it was just incredibly dramatic. I don't think there's any moment that could be that dramatic. Some of us may have been with someone at the end of life. And I've done a lot of hospice work in my life. So I've probably been with around 30 or 35 people, friends, hospice patients who went at the moment of their death. And again, it's an incredibly dramatic moment. There's also when people accomplish great things, overcome great odds to accomplish great things, or, some things like the Olympic, where people work so hard to get to that Olympic stage, and they may be considered the best in the world, but will they win that gold medal? So there's all kinds of dramatic moments that are normal and healthy. And then, as we all know, there's that other kind of drama. And we tend to be, if we're honest, somewhat addicted to that kind of drama, or it wouldn't be the primary type of media that the world is trying to market to us and use to market products to us. We all remember the days of some of us may remember the days of the daytime soaps, right, that were named that because they were trying to market detergents and cleaning products to then mostly stay-at-home moms who were back in the 1950s and 60s. That was the tendency for women to stay at home. But there were probably stay-at-home dads back then as well. And then later they figured they could do nighttime soaps to everybody, and people would get addicted to that as well, and they could market all kinds of products. And as we all know, all that has now been replaced by reality TV, and it's the most popular medium on television. And there's a reason for it, because we're willing to watch it, right? So let's talk about how that happens exactly, right? How is it that we get so attracted to that kind of drama? So our human condition is basically a setup to have a sort of survival-focused, fear-based approach to life. Quite naturally, job one for any species is survival, right? So naturally, our brain and our nervous system is set up to pay more attention to danger and warning signs and anything new, anything we don't understand, any kind of novelty. We hear a noise we're not familiar with. The alarm bells go off in our brain, the amygdala in the midbrain, and then that triggers the reptilian brain to start kicking into the stress response or the fight or flight response, and our whole physiology begins to upregulate. And that creates a particular neurochemical mix in our brain. And so when we're having positive experience, quite the opposite happens, right? The positive experiences tend to just kind of go right on by. Negative experiences of danger and discomfort, not only do we remember them with great clarity because that's what the brain needs to remember to survive, but they go right into long-term memory. Whereas positive experiences don't go into long-term memory unless we really dwell on them. The science says for 12 to 20 seconds. So guess what our long-term memory is mostly full of? That's right, negativity. So when we turn on the 6 o'clock news or watch 24-hour cable news, what do we see? Nothing but negativity, right? The old newspaper slogan, if it bleeds, it leads. So many people have asked, why don't they put positive things on the news? Because nobody would watch it, right? And the corporations wouldn't be able to market their products, and newscasters wouldn't make the kind of very high salaries they make. So that's just, the way that our commercial media works. And it's based on the fact that we're attracted to negativity. In fact, psychologist Rick Hansen, who's somebody I recommend his work a lot, and he's been interviewed, I know, by the Awake Network and SMC before. And he talks about that our brain is really set up to act like Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity. So again, that's what's in our neurobiology. And when we dwell on that, it creates a particular neurochemical mix in our brain, and we adapt to that and we get addicted to it. So we're very attracted to it. So that's kind of the background of one of the reasons we're attracted to drama. So the drama triangle in particular revolves around 3 classic characters that are at the heart of any melodrama or any crime drama, right? There's that kind of reality TV show drama, but there's also the really well-acted, crime dramas and good movies and really well-done television shows. And for it to be a really compelling drama, there's got to be something at stake. There's got to be some danger. There's got to be some tension. And usually the action constellates around 3 primary characters. I'm sure you already know what they are. We always have a hero and a villain, right? Good guy, good girl, bad girl, protagonist, antagonist. And they constellate around a third person, the classic damsel in distress, or the victim, right? Some of you may remember a cartoon based on an old melodrama. At one point, I think it was on the Rocky Bullwinkle show or something like that, but has the character Dudley Do-Right, the Mountie, and the classic damsel in distress Nell, and then there was the villain Snidely Whiplash, right? So this has been around for a long time, and it's really at the heart of all of our great novels and movies and television serials and so forth. So Cartman named this triangle, and he called the villain the persecutor, and he called the hero the rescuer, and the villain the villain. And it's important to remember when we're talking about the drama triangle, we're not talking about people. We're not labeling people as persecutors or rescuers or victims. Rather, these are psychological positions or mindsets, or you could say personas or even archetypes that we all get into and we all move through. We all have our version of them. And I really want to normalize them right now. So what we mean by the victim mindset that we all can move into is anytime I'm feeling even mildly uncomfortable, mildly dissatisfied, mildly irritated, much less really upset, and I'm attributing the causation of my internal state, how I'm feeling, to someone or something outside myself. Well, of course, we all do that all the time, right? It's very compelling. Things happen and we have feelings and we think the cause is out there, right? And whatever that cause is, that's who we label as the persecutor, right? Could be a situation, could be the weather, could be a person, could be the management of our company, our boss, could be the government, could be, a person or many persons, or it could be a situation that we label as the persecutor, that person causing our discomfort or our upset. And of course, when we're in that situation, for example, we're at work and we're not happy with how our boss is acting or treating us or something, or we have a conflict with a coworker, usually what we do is we just walk right over, right? And we say, hey, boss, we need to sit down and work through this. Or, hey, coworker, we need to sit down and talk through this. Is that what we do? I don't think that's what most of us do most of the time, is it? No, instead of going there to deal with our perceived issue that we have, and of course, there's a lot of perception involved, so who knows what's actually going on. But even if there is a real situation, rather than going and dealing with that straightforwardly, we generally go find somebody else we can complain to, somebody who will commiserate with us, even sometimes somebody who will join us to gang up on our perceived persecutor. Once we go there, instead of going to deal with the problem at hand, now we have the triangle. And once the triangle forms, it creates its own toxic energy and often begins to spin because the roles shift and so forth. So I want to give just a little vignette here, right? So I'm going to do my best to kind of act this out. So let's imagine that we have a family, and for purposes of this little vignette, I'm going to use a kind of standard nuclear family. So we have little Joy. Little Joy's the kid, and he's home after school. And then we have George, his dad, and mom is Ellen, right? And of course, this could be two same-sex parents, or it could be lots of different configurations. But we're going to go with little Joy, George, and Ellen, right? So little Joy's out in the backyard playing after school. He's having a good time, just out there being a little kid. And George gets home, and George says, "Ellen, where's little Joy?" And she goes, "Oh, I think he's out in the backyard." And George, "Well, has he done his homework?" "Well, I don't know. I'm not sure." "Well, he clearly, I can see, hasn't done his chores. He's never going to amount to anything. I come home and I'm going to go out and find him." Well, goes out in the backyard. "Little Joy, where are you?" "Hi, Dad. Good to see you, Dad. How are you?" "Joey, you haven't done your homework." "Well, gee, Dad, I'm going to do it later. I was just out playing for a little while." And "Joey, you haven't done your homework and you haven't done your chores. Joey, you're going to turn out to be a bum. You're never going to amount to anything." Of course, about this time, who rides into the rescue? Of course, Mom, Ellen, rides in. "George, don't talk to little Joy like that. Of course he's going to not turn out well if you're destroying his self-esteem and always picking on him and yelling at him." And of course, little Joey doesn't like his dad yelling at him, but he idolizes Dad and doesn't like Mom yelling at Dad. So little Joy goes, "Dad, Mom, don't talk to Dad like that. No wonder he's always picking on me, because you're always picking on him." And of course, Dad, George, doesn't like little Joy talking back to Mom. "Little Joy, don't talk to your mom like that," right? So you can see the roles just spin. The roles spin, right? George is persecuting little Joy. Mom comes into the rescue. Then Joy turns around, persecutes Mom, right? Then George rescues Mom and persecutes Joy again. The roles just spin and spin and spin and spin. I'll give another quick example. Suppose we've probably, most of us unfortunately had that experience. We're driving home from work or we're driving somewhere and suddenly we see those flashing lights in the rear view mirror, right? And we pull over and we're just, our heart sinks. I'm getting pulled over. I'm going to get a ticket. Oh, and what do we feel like that? Of course, we feel like a victim, right? Who's the persecutor? The officer. And, we would love to have a lawyer or fix a ticket, or maybe we have a passenger, they'll commiserate with us, but we feel victimized. Why aren't they chasing the real criminals? Why are they picking on me? I was only going 5 miles away, well, maybe 7, well, maybe 12. But anyway, why aren't they chasing the real bad guys, right? So we feel victimized. The police officer, we think they're the persecutor and we want a rescuer, right? So the police officer has a little different view of that triangle, right? They see them as the rescuer, right? Who's the persecutor, or in this case, the perpetrator? Us, right? And who are they rescuing? The public good. So there are always different versions of the drama triangle going on, right? I mean, this plays out in families. It plays out, we need to have a sense of humor about the drama triangle because it is part of the human condition. It's part of life. And again, all the great literature is about this. But at the same time, it can be incredibly destructive. This drama triangle, once it goes and goes unchecked, it creates like a vortex of negative toxic energy. I'm sure you've all had the experience where somebody's got a big drama going on and you just feel yourself kind of getting pulled in or trying to pull you into that drama, right? We've all had that experience, maybe at home or out socially or at work, where we feel ourselves being pulled into somebody else's drama. And once the triangle forms, that's what it does. It spins, creates this vortex of negative toxic energy, and starts to pull in people and resources and time and energy. This plays out on the global stage too. I'm not going to go into a big discussion about politics here, but it's not hard to connect 9/11 with the longstanding conflict in the Middle East, Israel-Palestine conflict. In fact, that's one of the excuses they gave. And now, 3 wars later, trillions and trillions of dollars spent on destroying lives. And, unfortunately, this is where we're still at in the world, that, these dramas just unchecked, they create just unimaginable destruction. And not only do they continue to spin, but they spin off other drama triangles. So anyway, I hope I've made a compelling case here that it would be helpful to know how to get ourselves unhooked from drama once we've, so as they say, swallowed the hook. Okay, so we're going to talk now about how to get off the drama triangle. You may be familiar with Pema Chodron's book, Don't Bite the Hook, right? And she uses the Tibetan word shempa for hook. Once we take things personally, once we imagine that our internal state is caused by someone or something outside ourselves, and we get triggered emotionally, we've bitten the hook. We're hooked, we're on the drama triangle. So how are we going to get off the drama triangle? Well, the first step, obviously, is to recognize it, because when we're involved in drama, do we always recognize it? No, normally we don't. We're just in the drama. We're maybe finger pointing and blaming, and we're upset. We might be yelling. We're involved in some conflict, or we're just stewing inside, but we're in the drama and we don't realize we're in the drama. So we need to train ourselves to learn to recognize when we're hooked in drama. So the victim position is pretty easy to recognize because by definition, I'm upset, right? So if I find myself emotionally triggered, upset, like that, the physiology of being upset, racing heart, racing thoughts, palms sweaty, breathing faster, I'm emotionally triggered, I'm upset, I should just train myself to immediately think drama. Okay, this is drama. What am I going to do? It may be a little more difficult to recognize when we're in the persecutor position or when we've gravitated towards the rescuer position. The persecutor position is when we're trying to control, dominate. It's that critical, judgmental, dominating, controlling energy. And so why would we do that? What would we be looking for there? Well, obviously we're looking for power and control, right? And so that must mean we feel what? Well, we're feeling powerless or a lack of control, which is by definition what position? The victim position, right? So we say that the underlying position to the persecutor is the victim position. And we realize that all people who become chronic persecutors, chronic abusers, were in fact themselves at one time abused and often quite damaged. So then we have the rescuer as well. And the rescuer is a psychological position where we're helping people, but from up here, right? It's like we have a need to be on top. We're the savior, the fixer, and we get our ego needs met, we feel strong by being the person who can help the victim. And do we really want them not to be a victim anymore? Well, not really, because then we're out of the job. Now, very few of us are going to be pure rescuers, but to the extent that we have that psychological need to be the rescuer, to be on that top position, that, if that's conflated with our natural instinct to help people, then it's less helpful because it's demeaning and it's enabling and it colludes with victims, right? And it keeps people down here. Instead of seeing people up here, we see them down here, right? So these are these positions of persecuting and rescuing and the victim mindset. So we can recognize the persecutor because we all have our own style of that finger wagging or the shooting, or, often it's the critical download we got from our parents, that not so happy side of our parents that they passed on to us. And we hear it just coming out of our mouths sometimes, even to our own kids, right? So, but when we get into that, we all have our style of trying to dominate, trying to control. So we need to learn that. What posture we get into? What does our voice sound like? What are some of the classic statements we make? We also all have our style of being a rescuer, right? If we find ourselves thinking, boy, if I don't go into work today, the whole place is going to fall apart. They couldn't run that place without me if they tried. Or, I'm just the person that everybody comes to with all their problems. Well, maybe I'm a good listener, but maybe I also got a little bit of the rescuer thing going on. So we need to learn to recognize our style of each of these. When I'm getting locked into that victim mindset, what does it feel like? When I'm getting into my persecutor thing, what does that sound and feel like? And when I'm getting into my rescuer thing, what does that sound and feel like? And then I can recognize, oh, drama. Oh, there I go with my persecutor thing. There I go with my rescuer thing. Or I'm really upset. I'm getting hooked into a drama here. So that's the first stage, to recognize it. The next step, really, we talk about use your voice. But before that, we also, as we recognize it, it's helpful to stop and take some space, to downregulate a bit. So we've all heard, when you're upset, if you're really angry, what are you supposed to do before you do anything else? You're supposed to count to 10. If you're really angry, you're supposed to count to 100, right? By the time we do that, we calm down a little bit. Why? Well, for one thing, counting distracts us from the triggering stimuli, but also when we're locked into that reptilian brain response, the fight, flight, or freeze, the stress response, the reptilian brain can't count. So that takes us back into the access to the rest of our brain and to our neocortex, where our executive function is, where we're able to make rational decisions, have good judgment, and so forth. So when we're really hooked, we lose access to our executive function. So the first thing we got to do is regain access to that. So count to 10, count to 100, take a few deep breaths, right? Do something like straw breathing, which maybe we'll introduce in a moment. Well, I'll just do it for a second right now. Breathe in through the nose, out through pursed lips. In through the nose, out through pursed lips. And ideally, you're breathing with the belly as you do that, diaphragmatic breathing, in through the nose, out through pursed lips. And then you want to extend the out breath 2 or 3 counts or beats longer than the in breath. So you might breathe in a 4 count, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out a 7 count, right? So breathe in through the nose, out through pursed lips, extend the out breath a little longer than the in breath. If we do that, brings us right back down, right? It engages the relaxation response, or what's called the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. Because when we're triggered and we're off to the races, what happens is the sympathetic branch has been engaged and we're upregulated. We're getting all upregulated. The reptilian brain is taking over, disengaging the executive function. So by doing something like straw breathing, belly breathing, counting these things, bring us back down, we regain access to the neocortex and to our executive function. And then we can go on to use our voice internally to begin with. Internally, because using our voice externally in that moment might be the worst thing we want to do, right? We're just not ready to do that. We're just going to pour gasoline on the fire probably. But internally, we say, use your voice. In other words, we don't want to stuff it. We don't want to just all the slings and arrows and moments of discomfort or moments of disrespect, or when we perceive we've been disrespected. If we just keep throwing those into that resentment bag, we just carry it around. It gets heavier and heavier in life. We're dragging that thing around till somebody upsets us so bad and we hit them over the head with 50 years of resentments. Not a good idea. So instead of stuffing it, we acknowledge to ourselves, I'm really upset. I am angry. I'm afraid. In other words, we use our voice to own our feelings. And you notice the pronoun I'm using, I. I is the pronoun of ownership. So we're shifting from, when we're caught in drama, it's often you, they, them, right? We're in the projecting, blaming language. We're projecting the cause for our internal state out onto somebody or something else, and we're blaming. So instead of doing that, we shift to ownership language, reflective language. I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm really afraid. I'm disappointed. I feel hurt. So we're owning our feelings, and that further helps us down-regulate, because the reptilian brain can't do that either. Then we look and see what's going on underneath all those feelings. Why am I so upset? Why am I angry? Why am I afraid? Why am I disappointed? Why am I hurt? So this is a real key component here. And it's the connection between our feelings and our needs, our emotions and our needs, right? Very often we think that our feelings are caused, and always my internal state's being caused by somebody or something outside myself. Well, let's look at that for a moment. What are basic human needs? Basic human needs are like food, warmth, and shelter, but also connection to others. We're social animals, our own autonomy, our own space, self-agency, love, to give love and receive love, respect, validation, creativity, self-worth. These are all human needs we all have. And how do we feel when our needs are being met? Well, we feel good, of course, right? So all the warm and fuzzy emotions arise when we perceive our needs being met. Well, how about when we perceive our needs being challenged or threatened, or that they're not being met? Well, then we start to have other kinds of feelings and emotions, right? We may feel afraid, sad, disappointed, upset, angry, even envious or jealous or hateful. All these kinds of more challenging emotions can arise based on our perception that our needs are not being met, or that they're threatened in some way. Okay, well, you notice I said perception. So ask yourself if your perceptions are always accurate. Probably not, right? Sometimes we completely misperceive things, right? We imagine things. We completely misread a situation, right? So we can, once we're in touch with what the needs we're perceiving are not being met, like maybe my need for autonomy is not being met here, maybe my need for inclusion, my need for respect, my need for security, my need for validation. So I'm feeling my needs not being met. So I can check that. Is that really true? So I can, well, yes, no, maybe here. And, I can reflect, and maybe I get down to where I see I am misperceiving situations, or maybe I get down to where I see, okay, there's certain needs that really feel like they're not getting met here. Okay. Well, of course, I'm further down regulated because the reptilian brain can't even begin to do those kind of reflections. And I can get to the point where maybe I'd be ready to communicate something to someone I'm in conflict with, where I'm not going to blame them, and I'm not going to come on with any kind of aggression or blame, and they have no reason to get defensive. I'm simply going to share that a situation arose, and I found myself having all these feelings, and I've had time to reflect on it. I realized that this was what was going on with my needs, and I realized, and this is, it's not your fault at all. This was just my internal process, and I'm just thinking, maybe there's some ways we could approach these kind of situations differently in the future, where we would all get our needs met more. And you probably had the same kind of experience. Once we get to the level of needs, it's very universal, understandable, because we all have the same needs. So that goes on to the next one. So we use our voice instead of stuffing it. We own our feelings. We state our needs clearly, first to ourselves, and where applicable with other people. We give people that information, not that they have to meet our needs. We're not demanding they meet our needs, but at least they have the information, right? And then finally, sometimes we just have to make a boundary. Sometimes we just have to make a boundary, right? Sometimes we just have to say, hey, if you're going to use that kind of language, that doesn't work for me, or, this doesn't seem to be going anywhere, let's come back to this next week. Sometimes to get off the drama triangle, we have to be willing to make a boundary. And actually, if we want to avoid a lot of drama in our life, it's good to work on having good, clean boundaries in general. So those are the steps for getting off the drama triangle.
Thank you so much, Fleet. I just wanted to take a moment to remind everyone that's watching that you can write your questions in the comment area below. So we're going to be, in just a couple minutes, taking some of your questions. So go ahead and take a moment to ask the questions that you'd like Fleet to answer, and we'll be getting to those shortly. Or Fleet, did you have anything else to finish up with for the presentation, or should we move on to that now?
I just want to say one thing briefly. I want to be really clear that that we know people are really victimized in life. Horrible, heinous things happen to people, and terrible things may have happened to many of us or some of us. And so this is not about blaming the victim at all. It's nothing like that. And this isn't like to go to someone else who's suffering or has been victimized and saying, don't you realize you're on the drama triangle? No, that would not be helpful at all. This is for us to realize where we can have more choice in life, to see when we are caught up in a drama of some kind. And we may need a lot of self-compassion. We may need a lot of validation. We may need compassion for others. But having these insights into how the psychology of drama works can allow us to empower ourselves to get off the drama triangle and seek the help we need, right? Because we're never going to get our needs met on the drama triangle. I do this process live in all my seminars, and I'll have people get in groups of 3 and they pick a drama and they start playing it out. What they quickly realize is it's endless. There's no resolution. As long as they don't take steps to get off the drama triangle, if they keep just letting the roles spin around and they go from persecutor, rescuer, back to victim and so forth, it's endless. It's just endless suffering. So your homework after this is as you go out in the world, just pay attention to the drama triangles. You will see them everywhere. And when we see them, we can at least make choices about which ones we want to participate in or not. Okay, I think we lost your audio there for a moment, Kaylee.
Yeah, I'm back now. Thank you so much, Lee. This is an incredibly helpful model. And so we have some questions pouring in. Let's see. I'm going to start with just one moment. So we have a comment from RP who says, I would like some practical suggestions on detaching from an ex that drives me absolutely nuts on certain occasions. Him and I share a child, and no contact is not an option. He does things that are so inconsiderate and unkind.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing is always to look at ourselves, unfortunately. You know, we're always looking out there, right? And like you say, you have someone in your life, your ex, who's acting in ways that make you very uncomfortable, very unhappy. So the first thing is always to look at ourselves. Why does that make us so unhappy? Why does that hook us? You know, one of the great psychological insights of Western psychology, and you can find variations of this in the East as well, is that anything out there that bothers us or really triggers us or really frustrates us is a window into our own stuff. So there's some reason that that's our trigger. And the first most helpful thing is just to acknowledge that's my trigger. I have that trigger. That's a hot button. My ex is really good at pushing that button. But the thing is, the important thing to recognize, it's my button. I can't control, you know, if you're looking for a solution here on how to change your ex, right? Good luck, right? But how can we change ourselves to empower ourselves to work with our own triggers such that we become less triggerable, right? And people in our lives, like your ex, can do something, and you see that hook, they're throwing out that hook, right? They're really good at throwing that hook out, and you see that hook coming, and you want to swallow it really bad, but you just go, I'm not swallowing this one. I'm not swallowing this one. And it went by. And one time you didn't get hooked, that much less suffering in your life. So I wish I could have given you an easier answer, but I think really the direct answer is to really get insights into how do we get hooked into drama? What are the things that upset us? And seeing those as our hot buttons and our hooks. And that's something we can do something with. Now we think, well, that's letting somebody off the hook for the terrible activities they're doing. Or think, well, you know, if we want to spend our time complaining about trying to change other people, right? It's kind of an endless program of suffering. But if we focus on ourselves, that empowers us to be in charge of our own life, right? And that puts us back in the driver's seat.
Thank you. So this next one might be related. Someone who's looking for suggestions on how you can tell when you really are a victim in a situation versus just taking on that role.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I don't know that it's because, you know, the question of are we really a victim? I'm not even sure if that's really the critical question, because, you know, things happen in life. Things happen, and some things can happen that directly really negatively impact us. I mean, somebody could hit us. We could have a physical violation of some kind, right? And that really directly impacts us. We were clearly victimized. But, you know, anytime anything uncomfortable is happening, you know, we feel like we're being victimized. And so whether it's a very minor thing and it's just based on our misperceptions or our perceptions, or whether it's something really serious that happened, right? The important thing is, as you were saying, do we want to take on the role or an identity of a victim? It's one thing to have been victimized in some way and have that validated and get the healing we need, even seek justice or whatever we need, to move up forward. And it's another thing to get locked into the mindset of the victim, to the victim identity. And that's where the problem really lies, right? But I think the thing is always, getting off the drama triangle or trying to get ourselves unlocked from a victim mindset happens in a ground of self-compassion. It's not about being in denial that things happen. If we get hurt, we need to give ourselves compassion. We may need compassion for others. We need our healing. And at the same time, we can look and see what's in my own enlightened self-interest here. What's going to keep me hooked and keep me suffering more? And what could release me to get healing and move forward with my life? I think we lost your audio again.
Sorry about that. So now we have a question from Chris, who asks if you can briefly comment on repetitive patterns of behavior. For example, if I'm expecting love and acknowledgement from distant, unavailable people, am I assuming the victim role?
Well, a colleague of mine says that expectations are planned resentments. Expectations are planned resentments. So I think that's a good one to keep in mind. Also, Fred Luskin, whose work I like very much, he's a researcher at Stanford University, part of the Research on Altruism and Compassion project, and he's done a lot of work around forgiveness and grievances. And I don't know if he invented this expression, he may have, but he talks about unenforceable rules, that we all have a huge list of what he calls unenforceable rules. And we don't usually even let the world know what our unenforceable rules are. But when anyone breaks one, there's hell to pay, right? And why are they unenforceable? Because we cannot control other people. Other people are uncontrollable, right? So, and how do you know that? Because you're uncontrollable, right? I mean, how many of you out there in the audience right now want your family and friends controlling you, your coworkers controlling you? I don't think you do, right? But we spend a lot of energy trying to control other people. So we have all these rules about how other people are supposed to behave. And when they break those rules, we're really upset. But we're just setting ourselves up. It's like expectations or planned resentments. We're setting ourselves up for suffering. So it's really about taking ownership for our own physiology, our own emotions, our own experience, and using mindfulness practices, contemplative practices, using awareness to place ourselves in the optimal position to be self-empowered, to engage life in a responsive way in getting our needs met. And when we get locked into certain people have to meet our needs, we're really just setting ourselves up for more suffering. And it's not about being an island. It's not like I don't need anybody. We live in a relational field, but when we're more conscious, then we don't keep getting into this idea that other people are breaking my rules and they're making me unhappy and I'm suffering so much and it's all because of other people. That's denying that we have choice, right? So anyway, I hope that's helpful.
Mm. And our next...
The idea of repetitive patterns is a good one because, look, we all have repetitive patterns. We've all been programmed. We were all highly conditioned and programmed by the time we were 7 years old, before we had anything to say about it. And we live in the world kind of at this interface between our conditioning and the world out there, getting bounced around and pushed around. We think we're conscious, autonomous adults walking around making autonomous free decisions all day. It's actually not the case. We're mostly responding habitually and reactively to the world, getting bounced around in that interface. So if we start taking ownership for our own conditioning, what it is, all of our personality characteristics, our hot buttons, our repetitive patterns, and start working with that and stop blaming what we're feeling on the world around us, that puts us in the driver's seat and we can really start stepping into our own destiny by really stepping into radical self-empowerment and autonomy.
So our next question is from Anne, and she's looking for more suggestions to break out of the reactivity in the heat of the drama triangle, in addition to straw breathing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, there's a path quality to all this. I mean, there's things you can do in the moment, right? So if we're triggered, we have one and one only job. When we're emotionally triggered and in a reactive state, we have one and one only job, and that's get ourselves untriggered. So we need to learn to use state shifting methods. In other words, like counting to 10, counting to 100, or taking one deep belly breath, another deep belly breath, and counting to 10 that way, or doing the straw breathing that I modeled before, or just the expression, remember my feet. That just takes me right into my body, onto the ground, and I feel grounded again. There are many, many, many different state shifting methods. So we can use those to get ourselves untriggered and into a more reflective state and go, what's really going on here? And, why am I reacting? What's going on? What am I feeling? Honor our feelings. It's not, I'm upset. Okay, why am I upset? Well, I'm perceiving this need or that need is not being met. Well, is that really true? Well, I think so. We'll check it out. Is that really true? Well, maybe partially, maybe not at all, or yes, maybe that need is not getting met. Okay, is there another way I can get that need met? Is there another place I can get that need met? So moving into this reflective place. So there's lots of things we can do on the spot, but at the same time, there's a path quality to it. And part of it is being willing to really feel, that reactivity, the willingness to feel. The reason we really go off into habitual patterns and reactivity is we're not willing to feel, right? That's why approaches to meditation and mindfulness that are very embodied and focused on feeling and direct sensing, where I'm just, as I'm practicing and through my life, developing a greater and greater willingness and capacity to feel whatever I'm feeling in the moment, that allows me to sit with some upset or some reaction I'm having without going off to the races, right? Jumping right into the frying pan with a lot of conflict because I'm willing to feel it. We get into a lot of trouble in our lives, including all the trouble with substances and drugs and the huge opioid epidemic that's going on right now because we're not willing to feel. So I think the first step is, take a breath and be willing to feel what's going on and then reflect on it and see what's really going on for ourselves until we can get ourselves into a place, okay, what's the best thing that I can do right now for myself and for others? What's the most enlightened, most creative response I can make in the middle of this situation that's in my own enlightened self-interest, which means my long-term interest, and that usually works out to be in the interest of others as well.
And we have someone asking if you could give an example from your own life of how you employ these teachings.
Well, some of you may know my backstory. I was in a maximum security prison for 14 years on drug charges, which is not something I'm proud of at all. I have a lot of deep regrets about being involved in harmful activities for a good part of my life when I was young. But I do feel very good about what I did with my time because I really used that 14 years to transform myself. And the drama triangle was a big piece of that. And the radical responsibility path that we're going to talk about later really came out of that experience. I developed it transforming myself in that environment. Well, in that environment, it's like you are in a cauldron of emotional triggering 24/7. You're just surrounded by emotional triggers all the time. There is a potential violent incident raiding around every corner. Most prisons are extremely overcrowded. You live on units I lived on a unit designed for 50 men. We usually had 175 to 185 men living on that unit. No air conditioning, heat of summer. It's just crazy, right? And so, if you don't learn to manage yourself and self-regulate, you're going to be in absolute chaos. And a lot of prisoners are in constant chaos. So I kind of learned in that cauldron that I had to really work with mindfulness tools and contemplative tools and self-regulation tools like the straw breathing I just modeled earlier to try to keep myself in the most awake, aware, non-reactive state that I could so I could make good decisions and really not get myself really hurt or not end up hurting somebody else. And, in 14 years in prison, I probably ended up in maybe about a half dozen confrontations. Well, I probably avoided like 10,000. Right. And fortunately, I was able to get through that half dozen confrontations without anybody getting hurt, including myself. So, those are some examples of using this. But, even, in my day-to-day life today, I'm in a relationship. I have the most amazing partner. Her name is Sophie. And, we're two human beings living together. Right. So we can each do and say things that can trigger each other. And I am really committed to having as much as possible drama-free relationship in my life at this point in my life. Like I got a big T-shirt on, it's got drama with the circle and the red line through it like that, right? No drama. So in order to, have a really wonderful and joyful and intimate and loving relationship with my partner, we both have to be committed to really working at not getting caught up in habitual patterns of drama with each other. And, we're both far enough along our life that it's not as challenged as it might have been earlier in our lives. So, but it's still work. There's always a choice point. Do you want to bite that hook and say something that's unkind or get involved in a conflict? Or do you want to take a breath, step back, and remember that this is a person you love, and okay, let's find some way to engage a positive conversation or just explore what somebody's feeling or needing, right? So I mean, these are things I use all day long, every day, because there's just drama everywhere. And it's not like I'm avoiding life. I'm out in life doing prison work and training law enforcement and correctional officers, and I go to Auschwitz every year with the Zen peacemakers, and I've been to Rwanda several times in the last 10 years, and I'm out there. I go in the streets with doing the street retreats where we're out on the money with our friends who are homeless and that world. So I mix it up in the world. I get out, and so I'm not avoiding life, but at the same time, I navigate life to have as little of the unnecessary toxic drama in my life as possible.
Wonderful. So we have a new question from Leslie. She asks, when someone tries to place us in the villain role, making us responsible for their feelings, what words can we use to show empathy and understanding, yet be able to empower the other person or at least put the responsibility back on them?
Mm-hmm. That points to me to a model that I really love that I don't have time to go into at length here, but Marshall Rosenberg's work around nonviolent communication, right? And sort of the distinction I make in the steps off the drama triangle, that whole relationship between feelings and needs, that in part comes from Marshall Rosenberg's work, nonviolent communication. So, when somebody is placing us in that, the first thing is to see, okay, here's a human being, and, they're suffering in some way, right? They're suffering in some way. And, maybe they're projecting their suffering onto us, and they're projecting the villain or the persecutor role onto us in some way. So the first thing is, if we find ourselves starting to get triggered, to do, as Marshall says, some self-resuscitation on the spot, right? Give ourselves some self-compassion, like even internally. Wow, this is really hard. I can feel myself getting pulled into this. I got to breathe. I'm going to take care of myself, right? So we give ourselves that compassion and down-regulate and stay in a good place. And we look back and we see this human being who's obviously suffering. They're uncomfortable. They're in pain in some way. And we could just, say, maybe, it seems like you're really upset. Are you upset with me? Are you upset with something that's going on? And they might go, yeah. Well, I'm wondering what you're needing. Is it were you feeling disrespected here? Are you needing? So it's a way, and you have to learn not to do it in a rote way, because when you learn MVC to begin with, it comes off kind of rote, right? But basically, you're learning to first give yourself empathy, and then move into an empathic connection with the other person, and be curious, be genuinely curious about what they're feeling and what they're needing, and find a way in kind of engaging them in a conversation where you're not telling them what they're feeling and needing, because we don't know, but we can suggest or inquire or ask and invite them into a conversation where they get to express what they're feeling and needing, right? So they're getting empathy, they're feeling seen, they're feeling heard, and that can usually lead to a creative conversation that gets us off the drama triangle and back in relationship.
So we have a nice comment here from Constance, who says, just want to thank you for this most insightful information. I found it extremely helpful, and I'm looking forward to recognizing and using these tips in my daily life and relationships with myself and others. So yeah, if you want to ask questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section. You can also just voice what you're experiencing with this time with Fleet. It's very useful information. I agree, Constance. And then we have another question from Deb. How do you deal with sadness and depression, a kind of giving up or resignation to the drama, versus feeling it and owning it, and even recognizing it as a trigger?
Well, you said a number of things there, sadness and resignation. I think it is willing to feel, so willing to feel sadness, willing to feel upset, willing to feel fear, whatever. There's usually a myriad of different feelings coming up in any kind of situation. I have a colleague that is the executive director in our prison organization. She does this great process, kind of based on nonviolent communication, with these feelings cards and needs cards, right? And somebody will just talk about one conflict they're experiencing, and she'll just start putting out these feelings cards. There's usually 30 or 40 feelings involved in one single thing. So being willing to feel that helps us not get hooked on the drama triangle, and also is part of really honoring ourselves. It's compassionate to be willing to feel and honor what we're feeling, whatever the feelings are. Now, depression, and again, I don't want to be too, because all feelings are part of being alive as a human being. We're going to experience all these feelings. We're probably all going to experience some kind of depression at some point in our lives. But at the same time, in prison, I felt like there was a black hole of depression just kind of right over here somewhere. Like I could have given up and just fallen into a black hole of depression. When I went in, I was facing 30 years in a maximum security prison. It was just right there. And I kind of just learned to make a boundary with it. I just kind of made a boundary with it. And I used tools and contemplative tools and meditation tools to not to develop some kind of Pollyannish view, but to really work with my situation and work with myself to get my body and mind and heart into the most positive frame I could. And the most resilient frame maybe is even better. By doing the work, I felt more resilient, and I was able to, actually, I ended up getting to a place in prison where I had a very, very positive outlook. And the possibility of depression was always over there, but I just kind of didn't go there. Now, on the other hand, if we find ourselves in, suffering with some kind of depression, the way out is being willing to feel it and also getting help, not trying to do it alone.
Okay, we have a question from Marilyn. How do you avoid going through the same circular disagreements, like with a spouse, back and forth, round and round? Drama with just two people, not three.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one thing to keep in mind is that we all have, I'm going to make a very triangle here, but we all have a drama triangle going on between our ears, right? We beat up on ourselves and we rescue ourselves. We play the victim vis-a-vis ourselves, oh God, I shouldn't have had that big piece of cake. And, oh, I'm such a terrible person. I'm gonna work out real hard tomorrow. And then, oh, now I need to reward myself. I have a big bowl, but no, we just go back and forth with all this stuff. So if we have a lot of drama going on with ourselves all the time, guess what we're going to project out into the world? Right? If I'm walking around beating up on myself and rescuing myself and feeling like a victim vis-a-vis myself, and I've got all this inner turmoil, and if I'm really don't have much self-acceptance going on, I'm trying to live in a little narrow box where I feel okay about myself, instead of using contemplative tools like embodied meditation to really learn to just completely accept the totality of who I am. If I have all this drama going on, that's what I'm going to project out. And you get two people in a relationship, they have their internal dramas going on, so they co-create drama with each other. And then it turns into habitual patterns, and you see people get into that same old argument again and again and again. So, I think one thing is to find the right time to sit down, if it's an intimate partner or something, and just talk about, we seem to get stuck in the same conflict all the time. Do you see that? And find some non-threatening way to get an acknowledgement between the two people that we do seem to get caught in the same old pattern again and again and again. And then just inquire, would you be interested in, trying to find some way together to at least not do that one, at least get a new one that's, that I'm kind of bored with that one, right? And together, I think we can find our ways to make changes. I interviewed a wonderful couple who had been doing, they're psychologists who've been doing couples work for a long time. And they developed this discipline with each other. Whenever one person would bring up something that would be potentially triggering or upsetting, or might lead to that same old argument or that same old conflict, they really trained themselves to, instead of getting defensive, to just look with kind of curiosity and go, wow, well, tell me more. I'd really like to understand what you're feeling. And it's very hard to go there when your reaction is, you want to go into that, oh, you're always calling me that, or you're always doing that, or and you do that, and and getting into that kind of stuff. And instead go, wow, can you tell me more about that? I really want to understand what you're feeling. And if you can do that honestly, that just undercuts any tendency to go into that conflict, right? And they've developed an amazing relationship where they've been together, I think, 45 years or something. and they're able to lead relatively drama-free lives and maintain the cohesiveness and the love in their relationship, because they found that way to be really, instead of reacting to what each other are feeling, even when they're expressing something about the other, to or how they think the other's making them feel, instead they get curious about it and they ask for more information.
Thank you, Fleet. So this might be the last one, and it could be a good one to end on. I think I'm hearing a little echo. You want to turn your volume down slightly, Fleet?
Are we still getting an echo?
I think it's on my side.
Yeah, but I think it must be on your side. Do you want me to turn my volume down a little bit?
Yeah, I think that'll help. Thanks. I think it's good now. Okay, great. So I think this ties in with sort of the idea of gentleness and how we might work with this when it's when we might not be succeeding at letting go of the drama, or when we might have a hard time with stopping in the moment. So this person is asking, I get badly triggered by fear of rejection. Simple breathing doesn't help, and feeling fully is very difficult. To get tears, shaky, etc. Any other practical advice?
Could you say the first part again? They get triggered by
fear of rejection.
Fear of rejection, yeah. Well, you know, I mean, that's a classic fear that most of us have, and sometimes it's we're, you know, fear of rejection or abandonment, or sometimes it's fear of being overwhelmed. I suffer from both. You know, I've learned to, you know, my early relationships were all about either feeling overwhelmed or feeling abandoned, you know, and back and forth and back and forth and that. And I can trace back into my childhood and figure out how all that happened, you know. But so I think it's acknowledging that we have that fear. And, you know, probably doing some work in counseling to have some self-understanding of kind of how that developed. But in the end, I think it's really about being willing to feel the fear. You know, I saw a video one time with a teacher talking about a monastery they'd been in England somewhere. And in the refectory where the monks would gather and you know, do their reflections and their study, up on the wall there was a big sign, and it said, it said, the only way out is through. And I think that's kind of a universal truth. So fear of rejection may be very difficult to work with, and maybe the breathing isn't working. I would say, you know, keep practicing every skill set you can to manage your own physiology when you're feeling fear. But it's also about being willing to feel the fear and recognize fear is a valid emotion. It has intelligence in it, but it can also overwhelm us and really paralyze us. So we need to get to know fear. You know, sometimes fear comes up and we get afraid to feel the fear, and that's that second layer of fear that creates the paralysis. So I know what I'm suggesting is quite difficult here, but I think it really is about being willing to feel the fear and really look at what rejection means. You know, I mean, you know, there's a whole internal setup we have about being connected or not connected, and being rejected, and getting our needs met or not getting our needs met. And the more we can really do our own inner work so that we develop a much more stronger foundation of confidence in our own innate worthiness, our own innate basic goodness, then the more that we're able to kind of dance in life without it being so deadly about, am I going to get rejected or not? Am I going to, you know, we're able to. So that takes work. I'm not suggesting it's easy at all, but I would really encourage very embodied forms of meditation that are really grounded in self-compassion and self-acceptance to develop a stronger foundation from which we can look at that fear and realize it's just that. It's just fear, right? And nobody likes to get rejected, but we're all going to experience rejection in life, and we're going to experience connection, and we're going to experience rejection. We're probably going to reject other people, you know, and this is part of life. I think if we're willing to feel it, willing to look at it, and willing to keep developing that resiliency, we can get to a place where we can just, as Trungpa Rinpoche said this, Pema Chodron's giving quite a few talks based on Trungpa Rinpoche's book called Smile at Fear, and being able to get to that place where we can literally smile at fear.
Well, thank you so much, Fleet. I think we've come just about to the end of our time, but I did let everyone know that we'd have an opportunity to hear about your online course and the incredible work that you've been doing over the last 15 years with Radical Responsibility. So I want to take just a moment, if you'd be willing to tell us a little bit about your Radical Responsibility online course and why you created it and what we might expect if some people want to take that step.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, a lot of this came out of my experience of surviving, in a maximum security prison and actually using that time to completely transform my life over 14 years. So I synthesized it from many, many different streams of transformational technology, East and West, right? Western psychology and therapy and counseling and the human potential movement, Eastern traditions of the various Asian contemplative and meditative traditions and so forth, and my own direct experience in doing a lot of training and working in a lot of different programs and just a lot of transformational work. And so the drama triangle is part of that. That's one element of the model. The workshop itself online is an 8-module workshop that we're going to go through over the next 8 weeks. It'll start next week. We'll be in it for 8 weeks in dialogue with each other as we go through it. You'll be watching videos and engaging in dialogue with your fellow participants. And then you'll have access to the course for a full year following that. So you'll have access to go back again and again to the material as much as you like. And I'll be doing a live Q&A at some point during the 8 weeks to further answer your questions about the model. But radical responsibility, I say radical responsibility is the voluntary choice to embrace 100% ownership for each and every circumstance we face in life. Now, if you think about it, that's pretty radical. So that includes all the circumstances we can see maybe we had a little something to do with, but even the circumstances that everybody would agree just fell out of the sky and landed on our head. We choose to own those, to embrace those, not of any kind of self-blame whatsoever, but because that's the only place we have any power. As soon as I attribute causation of my situation or circumstances, something outside myself, I'm giving away my power. Right? If you, Kaylee, and I are in a conflict and I'm convinced it's your fault and you probably have a different view of things, maybe we go to a mediator and try to figure it out. And, she goes off, shows the videotapes to some people and, they finally come back and they agree with me that it's more your fault. Maybe even they say it's 70% Kaylee's fault or 60% your fault. I feel vindicated. The mediator says, well, no, Fleet, you do have to own 30 or 40%. I go, well, okay, I don't really believe it, but well, okay. I'll own that. But still, I feel vindicated because it's more your fault. So how much of my power am I giving away then? I'm giving away at least 60 or 70%, or maybe all of it, because if I really believe the cause of my upset, of my unhappiness is caused by you, then I just gave you power over my internal states. And of course, we all do that all the time. It's just instinctual, but it really, in the end, doesn't make sense. Now, this isn't about, blaming the victim or blaming ourselves at all. It's simply the choice, where do I want to put my energy? And I may have to sit there and feel like I've been victimized and have all kinds of feelings and feel hurt and rageful and get all kinds of blaming thoughts going on. And that may go on for a while. At some point, I can take a deep breaths. Okay, what am I going to do with this? Where's this going to take me? Okay, what can I do actually to take care of myself right now? What's the best thing I can do vis-a-vis this circumstance to move forward in my life? And that's what we call the magical, radical, responsible question. In face of any circumstance we might, no matter how difficult or how challenging, what can I do? Because the minute I ask that question, there's a million things I can do. There's always a million different ways we can approach anything. So this course takes us through a step-by-step approach to developing the resilience and the insight and the self-compassion to be able to face the circumstances we deal with in our lives day in and day out, some very minor, some really major, from that perspective of empowering ourselves to live a choice and put our energy here where we can actually have some influence, right? I can't control you. I can't control people out there in the world. I have some influence there. So I choose to place most of my energy here, working with that which I have some influence over, which is my own choices and my own behaviors and thus my own destiny. You can go all the way back to Marcus Aurelius in the Roman times. There's a quote by him that's something like, many of us think that our destiny is controlled by our circumstances, but it's not. I'm not belittling. Some of us are born into tough circumstances. There are a lot of tough circumstances. We would like to prevent a lot of those negative circumstances and change a lot of those things. Nonetheless, really our destiny is determined by the choices we make vis-a-vis those circumstances. The choices we make vis-a-vis those circumstances. So radical responsibility is learning to live at choice as an act of radical self-empowerment. And it's really a place of also radical compassion for ourselves and radical compassion for others. And it really lets us really get in the driver's seat of our own life, or at the very least in a co-pilot seat, right? Get in a leadership position with ourselves, where we're going to take a lot better care of ourselves, and we're going to interact with others in ways that they're a lot happier about as well, right? So we're going to do better for ourselves, better for everyone else. You know, it's a win-win situation. And we do that by learning all the skills to manage our own physiology, manage our own emotions, you know, manage this whole thing here in order to put ourselves at least in that co-pilot seat and make conscious choices that are in our own enlightened self-interest, which is generally in the interest of others as well. So that's radical responsibility, and we're going to go into it in great depth. It's very experiential. It's not a lecture. It's not a bunch of lectures. It's leading and guiding you through experience. There'll be lots of guided contemplations, guided meditations, guided processes. You'll need a workbook or a journal with you while you're going through the course so you can write down all your reflections. And it's really a journey in which you are going to discover the insights and distinctions of radical responsibility so that they'll really be your insights, your distinctions, and they'll empower you to move forward and create the kind of life that you'd like.
Thank you, Fleet.
And I think you can sign up right down below here, right?
Yeah, there's a link below this video, and there's also going to be a couple special bonuses that are going to be offered for the course as well. Fleet, I know that you're including your Windhorse Seminar membership, in which, could you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yes, well, that's a membership on my website, on Windhorse Seminars, and which is at fleetmaull.com. And on the premium archive, which you'll have access to for the next year, is there are over 40 videos of all kinds of different programs and guided meditations and other trainings I've led all over the world. And there are 40 audios, and they're not just the audio and video of each other. I mean, they're different things. They're audios and videos covering over 80 different programs that I've offered around the world. And you'll have access to all of that for the coming year.
Yeah, it's a really incredible course. And also, Shambhala Mountain Center is offering their guided meditation library for anyone who purchases as well. And so that includes over 40 guided meditations with some really incredible meditation teachers, including Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, Joseph Goldstein, and many, many others. And we're also offering it at a really amazing price right now for the Awake Network and Shambhala Mountain Center communities. Usually it's offered at $397. And we're just opening registration tonight and only until Saturday. So today is Wednesday, and Saturday the registration will close because the course is starting next week on April 4th. So for those that are able to enroll in the next few days, the course is being offered with all of the bonuses for only $197. So it's a great time to participate if it's something that you feel ready for. And yeah, I hope that many of you are able to join us.
Right down there, you can sign up right now. I just offered this course live in Austin, Texas last weekend. And in 2 weeks, I'll be in Philadelphia offering it live. And I've been offering this all around the world, all over the US and Canada, in Latin America and in Europe. I've even done forms of it in Africa. And people just find it incredibly life-changing. And it's taking us through a path that really does start to put us again in the driver's seat, or at least the co-pilot seat of our own life. And people find it incredibly transformative, incredibly enlightened. And I just get, the feedback I get from around the world all the time. It's just tremendous gratitude once people do this course. And some of the ideas in it may even be familiar to you. As I said, I've drawn from a lot of different streams, east and west, but people remark they've never seen anybody put it together this way in this kind of a program and this kind of a path that just works so well. It just takes us right into this transformative path and just starts to open up new possibilities for us immediately. So I'm really excited to go through this with all of you over the next 8 weeks, and then to be available over the coming year to create community around this kind of work. So check it out right down there.
Yes. Thanks, Lee. Thank you so much for offering this to our communities and for offering it in a way that's so accessible. And yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And thank you again, Fleet. Take care.
Well, thank you, Kaylee, for creating this amazing community and making this possible. So thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night. We'll see you next week on Radical Responsibility.